Let's go! Hello, email geeks, email freaks, and everyone in between. This is the latest episode of Let's Talk Email with me, Stephen Sale, and my beautiful co-host,
Jay Orm.
So today I thought we'd talk to you a little bit more about email design systems and possibly ghost tables. What are they? How do you use them? Why would you use them? So I've quickly mocked up just a preview template of a Let's Talk email squared that we're just going to quickly run through today. So as if by magic, here's one I made earlier. This was made on Parcel.io, which Abby Goldman kindly built specifically for email. And it's a very handy tool. This is an IDE. What is IDE, Jay?
An integrated development environment. And we didn't just Google that.
So basically a code editor in layman's terms. Yeah. We'll go with code editor. We like that. So it's free to sign up. You can create all your emails in there. It'll have recommendations. There is obviously a paid tier. We are not sponsored, by the way, Avi. But yeah, it's really good to check out. If you don't have any experience with other code editors, it's a great place to start. So what I've done here is basically used a combination of Good Email Code by Mark Robbins, our lovely Jay's email reset styles that he kindly keeps updated on GitHub, all of which I'll list in the podcast description so you can have a look at yourself. And yeah, shall we dig in?
Yeah. I think so. I think I always so whenever I'm looking at design systems and things like that and bigger code bases that you're trying to work through and figure things out, the most, every module, everyone codes differently. So there's no way that you're going to know kind of how someone does a couple of columns, how someone does text, etc. Everyone has their kind of own style. But whereas the bit that I always really enjoy is going through the CSS at the top and all those bits, because generally people will work in a very similar way. And the way that you've broken this down is exactly the way that pretty much everyone does it. So you have your meta tags at the top, and then you have your fonts, and then you have your normal reset styles, kind of the body styles, that kind of stuff, universal styles, and then you go on and you have your mobile styles, and that's pretty much the way it works. And also that's the way the cascade works as well for CSS, right? So you start off with your reset, you go over that with your universal styles, and then for email specifically, you override those bits with the mobile stuff at the very bottom. That's the last bit. And then maybe if you were thinking about adding dark modes, that would come after the mobile bits where you're overriding everything that you've done before.
Yes, so typically, sorry, Jay. I was just going to say, typically I do add that mode after everything. And then there's also a catch-all for Microsoft Outlook specific commented out styles that I usually add at the end as well. But as you might have noticed from our last episode, we did speak about importing custom fonts. So this one's just wrapped in a if not Microsoft Office tag. It is using the import, but also linking to the style sheets themselves. You said that your preferred method was to actually open the style sheet and have it directly in the head, but this is just one I made earlier.
And like I mentioned before, there's different use cases for each, and this one works completely fine. So it's not like I don't do it. It's just knowing why things work certain ways I think is important. But yeah, if you that information comes straight from the Google font, so you can just literally take it and use it. So you're all good.
If you want to find out more, listen to that episode.
Yeah.
Quickly just whiz through this. Like you said, we have the reset styles. Again, that's from your GitHub repository. It is interesting because on your GitHub, you do explain what each one does and why it's there. Just for the purposes of this, I've just taken the comments out and kept it as condensed as possible. And then obviously we're setting the universal styles. So if we put in H1, it'll automatically get those styles. Same with H2s, paragraphs, setting the links, so the A tags. And then I have a little bit of hover animation if you feel a bit fancy. So it's a bit subtle on the main call to action. So it goes from black to a lighter gray. And then you'll see it better on the secondary buttons where you hover over and the colors actually change. And then we have the mobile styles. Again, won't go too much into this at this point, but this just allows these side-by-side columns you see here to stack on mobile and also tell the images to scale as well. So you should have a nice clean look whether you're on desktop or mobile.
That point is actually something that's really important for design systems. So when you're thinking about how you're going to code everything, one of the big things with email is you've got so many different screen sizes and so many different devices. So it's not as easy to have like 2 or 3 breakpoints where you're trying to make things do certain things. It's a little bit better to have kind of 1 breakpoint or maybe 2 where you decide you go from a larger display to a slightly smaller display, and then you just change how the content looks. Because then if someone opens it on a really wide screen, they've got a good experience. But then also if they open it on an iPad and then slowly down towards the smaller phones, everything just is responsive rather than having like a set size that it drops down to every single way. But yeah, email is a really good candidate for that because literally there's so many different ways that emails could render on so many different widths. So it's really like a nice way to kind of code that, I think.
And also,
you only have like one breakpoint normally, right? You don't normally do loads of.
Yes, usually on the email, I typically just have the 1 breakpoint, which is anything under 600 pixels, but specifically for mobile, max width 480. I found 480 to be the most common breakpoint size when looking at devices. So there was a good website, I forget what it's called right now, but it had all the size breakpoints for iPhones. So because iPhones are typically one of the most popular devices that emails are viewed on, and the most common one was 480, which is why I chose that one. Or it might have been just short of 480 and I just expanded it. So that's the breakpoint I use. So when you talk about responsive design in email, there's quite a few different terms when it comes to responsive design, because there's I believe there's flexible, spongy, responsive, and then there was one with media queries, like you were just mentioned before, with different breakpoints. Typically, I use the media query to snap that breakpoint and restyle, but I don't give anything fixed width. Once it hits that breakpoint, it just goes to percentages. So any other screen sizes, it should display nicely on. This is something that we can cover in a later episode. I believe I might have done an article about it on Medium. I will need to check up on that because we did have a talk with Mark Robbins quite a while ago on Email Geeks, where it was just, we were talking about all the different terms for responsive design and trying to come up with a more uniform way of describing them, because people have different names for the same thing. I will link it in the podcast description.
The way I was talking about it was not even thinking about the code. So actually the design itself is responsive. So you're not giving, like, a while back, we used to have this design that email everyone did, which was you had an email at 640 or 600 pixels and it looked like that. And then at 320, it looked like that. And there wasn't an in between. It like snapped from 640 to 320. Whereas most, I would think the majority of emails I see now, they just respond to the size of your screen, and the code is there to make it do something at a different size. But essentially the design is made so that on a bigger screen it looks one way, and then as things get smaller, the elements shift or move so it's the best experience. Yeah, the way you code it, I mean, yeah, like you said, there's so many different ways. And I'm sure we all call them something different. So yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I'm one of these people that have stuck with 600 width. Admittedly, the 640 does allow you extra space if you want to give like 20 pixels padding either side of your email. So on smaller devices, you just have that little bit of extra background color to differentiate the email from the background. Give a nice little treat for the eyes.
The only reason we use 640 is just it helps with the breakdown of columns. So where you have 10 pixels on either side, and then you have 3 columns of 200, you can then have 10 pixels of padding in between the 3 columns. Then you've got even. Whereas at 600 pixels, if you do that, then you've got like 180, 180, 180, like 540, and then the gap in between might like be 30 or something between them. So 640 allowed us to have padding on the outside and the insides as well. Everyone has their own has their own like size, like 300, 600, 640, and I think
it just
seen
makes
some up
maths
to like
easier.
700 now. Yeah. I think I've seen them up to like wider, because everyone's getting wider screens now on computers, so it's not as
That's it. Displays are always changing. So we've gone from like the 1080p HD graphics to 2K, and there's 4K, and I believe there's 8K. I don't think there's really 8K screens in the consumer market at the moment, but definitely I believe you can get the red cameras that they use for filming cinematic movies go up to 8K, or possibly even more now. But technology is always changing, and screen resolutions are always going up. It's just like when the Apple devices came out with their Retina screens. So it had, was it double pixel density compared to others? So typically, when you were creating website graphics, you would make them 72 DPI, dots per inch, or resolution. And when the iPhone Retina displays came out, those images kind of looked a little bit blurry because they were sharper screens. So that meant that we kind of had to, as email marketers, we had to double the resolution. So bring it from 72 up to 144. And it just made them just that little bit more crisper. And then there were other things that you could do to the code. So you could have 2x versions of your icons, and then if it's on iPhone, display those. If not, you could just display the normal resolution ones. But yeah, sorry, getting a little bit sidetracked on graphics. So I was just going to say this email is a pretty bog standard layout, having the view online at the top. So it's one of the first things you see. If there's any problems, rendering issues, the link is right there for you to click so you can have a look. I did debate whether adding just an unsubscribe button at the top as well. That is one of the major debates, just one of the debates that do go on between email marketers. So for this one, I've clicked with the black and white theme, so following the logo of the podcast. The background image, well, this is just a bog standard image. So there's usually like a hero image or the main point of your email, which goes at the top. You usually have a nice image, a H1 tag to title it, with a little bit of text underneath and a call to action. When we talk about email design systems, you might have each section code up as a block that you can refer to or import in at different times. And then when it comes to creating your next newsletter, you can reuse those blocks and just change the content. And it just makes designing and creating those emails really easy. So if I was to convert this into a email design system, I just need to find the code now. Here you can see in my main div here, we do have the image, the H1, the paragraph tag, and the call to action in this button here, and a spacer after it. I would typically make this one block, which I would reuse over and over in different emails. And then in this handy section 1 div tag that I've added in, this is where we have the image above some text and call to actions in their own little responsive modules. This is just for one row. So section 1 is just this top row here. And then I have reused it for the second row, and obviously just changed the content a little bit. I did have all intentions of having some other elements to show you as different blocks you could technically reuse, but this is just to give you an initial breakdown. And then below our column code, I have added in a section for the footer, where you could add in your address, which is required in some parts of the world to have included in your email. Also, again, as we discussed earlier, the unsubscribe link, and again, you could put the view online link so people don't have to scroll back all the way to the top, and any other information that you would like. So it could be your social buttons, links to the blog or anything else you might think your customers or your audience would like. And then I have added an extra section for any terms and conditions if you do any promotions or anything like that, and you need to add in some sort of terms at the very end. But yeah, that's pretty much a whirlwind introduction into an email design system. Is there anything that you want to pick up on, Jay?
No, I was just like, a lot of the things that you mentioned, like creating those modules and having them in their own container is kind of important. One of the things that we often think about is the Gmail limit on the 100 kilobytes. What we used to see was when you coded a whole email where you had one wrapper table and then everything was in a row. When that bottom of that table got cut off, everything then all went askew because obviously they didn't have the container. Yeah. So, having everything within its own like element, so that if everything got cut off, that if that was left by itself, it would still work. Is kind of really nice rule to have. And then also just looking through your code, everything is a similar element. So your buttons are all similar code, your paragraphs are all same code, all that kind of thing. And I think what we often don't talk about it, but having everything the same also really helps with updates and upkeep and things like that. So if your paragraph is, exactly, find and replace, or even just like, you need to add this new thing to a paragraph or whatever it is, like having them all the same is really helpful to do exactly what you're talking about. Because we all have to do it. Email clients change all the time. And, something comes out and you're like, oh, now I've got to add margin to every single paragraph in my email, and then you then sit there for 2 days going through your emails just trying to find all the paragraph tags.
A good example is when I learned about accessibility in email and adding role equals presentation to your table. So you kind of touched on it earlier, where each developer or coder has their own way of writing code. It's kind of like a signature in a way. So I always have a specific way. Usually, I have a specific way of writing my styles out. So if I was just to give an example, on this one, I have the font family, then I go to the font size, line height, color, padding, margin, and then anything else that I might add. And I always try and have it in the same order. So if I ever have to add anything else, I add it onto the end, and doing a quick scan down, I can see what's different because literally the line changes that little bit. And then with the buttons, like you say, having it the same when it comes to updates, it just makes your life a lot easier. Say you need to increase your font size from 16 pixels to 18, or if you switch from pixels to M or Rem or whatever kind of font size you use, it would be an easy find and replace. There is a thing with blocks in ESPs where if you refer to a block in your code and it imports that block, so your call to action or your paragraph, if you update the block on the ESP, anything that refers to that block automatically updates in all the emails that use it. That can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing if you don't take that into account. But again, I believe most ESPs have a feature to store blocks. So you don't need to keep them in your own local files. I believe we had a question on our last podcast episode where a viewer commented asking if there were any specific ESPs that were more easier to use when it comes to email design systems, but they all kind of have the same ability where you can create those separate blocks and refer to them. They might just have different ways of doing it. They might call them snippets, they might call them blocks. The code that you use to refer to those blocks could be a different template in language, because each ESP has their own one that they specifically use, be it handlebars, ginger, liquid, that was it. And it's just a case of reading the documentation, really. But I believe, Jay, you had a couple of ESPs that that are quite easy when it comes to email design systems.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, they're all pretty much the muchness. But I think what we're referring to is if you are coding your own. So
Yeah.
a lot of ESPs come with drag and drop editors that you can kind of set up modules and they have their own thing. But when coding your own, yeah, there's a few that are a little bit easier, and they have the features that you're mentioning, which is you save a block somewhere by itself, and then wherever you reference it, it updates. So Salesforce has its content blocks, and you can refer to them by their ID and bring them in and do things with variables and things like that. Same as Braze, they have content blocks as well where you can save things and refer to them. They both do it in a slightly different way, but they work really well together. And then, like you said, it's just about learning the language. But yeah, I can't. Yeah, I mean, Braze, Salesforce, any of the enterprise ones, kind of, I guess they realized early on that they had to have something set up so that you can easily manage an email design system. So yeah, those
Definitely.
exist. But then, there's lots of, like, Parcel, for example, has its own visual editor and ability to do components where you can create blocks, because not every ESP is super easy to use. There's lots out there now, like Taxi, Alpaco, Email Shepherd. There's probably hundreds more of template or drag and drop editors where you can upload your own code. And then those tools are specifically made to manage the code, create a nice drag and drop environment to do things. And sometimes a third party tool might be easier if you are doing that kind of thing where you don't want to be in the code or you don't want to be using variables. Because even with Braze, they use in the background of their drag and drop editor, if you didn't want to code and you wanted to use a drag and drop editor, they use B-free. So they like pull in B-free and like whitelist it as their own drag and drop editor, and loads of ESPs do that. But some people, like some of the elements within B-free, maybe it can't do what you want it to do. You can't do interactive modules or something like that. So then you would decide, actually, if I want an email design system that I code myself, but then I've got to give it to like a team of 10 people that don't code and they need to change modules and do colors and stuff, then one of those third-party tools might be a good direction to go in, especially if you're managing larger teams and you want to control brand and stuff like that. Then yeah, one of those tools might be something that could really help if you're creating an email design system for lots of people to use. Or even B-free even has the ability to do that as well, but outside of what Braze has chosen, the features that it would like to have. So yeah, there's lots of yeah. But yeah, no, like you said, it's if you are working in there every single day, then I have a slightly different role in an agency where I'm probably creating email design systems for lots of different brands all the time. But yourself, like, you would create a design system that you would use, and then once you've coded it, it's kind of set up and ready and done. And then you're just making emails from it every single day. So the ease of that part is really important, whereas the ease of setting up the email design system probably isn't as important, because you should only do it like once, I guess.
Yeah, it would, in a nice ideal scenario, it's a set up once and done. But you might have a rebrand coming up where you have to create a whole new email design system. Also, I was just thinking, a common issue with emails is when people have their copyright year in, and then we're coming up to the end of the year and they might not have updated it from 25 to 26. But if you had that in a block that the ESP refers to, you can just update it in that one block, and then when it sends out all the emails, it will be updated. Obviously, if you didn't have to manually change it, that's even better if you can use some JavaScript.
Use a templating language or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, January 1st, you're not there changing it on all of your blocks.
Nobody wants to be working on a holiday. But yeah, that's just another thing. I think that's pretty much it for email design systems. If you have any more questions, feel free to let us know, be it through comments, LinkedIn, or however you would like to get in touch. But we did mention that we were going to touch on ghost tables and what they are and why you would use them. So you did mention that I didn't technically have a wrapper at the start, but I personally,
it's different. Yeah.
I personally have it a little bit different when I use it. So I wrap mine in a ghost table, which is basically a table that's specific for Outlook. Theoretically, tonline.de does render Outlook specific code. There are ways around it. Check out how to target for those solutions. But what I typically do, as I mentioned before, I usually use a 600 width for my email. Because max width on divs don't really apply in Outlook, I have a ghost table which literally sets the width to 600 on Outlook devices. So it just brings everything to 600 regardless. Usually I do have a reset just in case it renders on mobile Outlook. So instead of being 600, the class is reset. So when it goes to a mobile, as we were talking about before, we have those breakpoints. The class reset would just give the width 100% instead, or you could put it 90 if you want a little bit of space either side. So that's how I typically add in a ghost table. And then there is a wrapper tag here, a normal wrapper tag in a div tag. And then the next example where I use oh no, I didn't use a ghost table there. Sorry. Sometimes on buttons, I have used ghost tables before just because the way the buttons display in Outlook doesn't necessarily look as nice and pretty as you can see on screen here with the rounded corners and things. And respecting padding on A tags, Outlook doesn't really do. So instead, sometimes I have a ghost table wrapped around my A tag just to style it a little bit more to give it a set width or add padding or a background color and things like that. It's just an extra fallback just in case. And there's different ways of targeting.
Essentially, so basically what you're saying is the anything that you've got in those comments is for Outlook, and then the other bits is for everyone else. So you're always just all that ghost stuff, or the reason we call it ghost is because technically it's like hidden everywhere else apart from Outlook. So that bit is the bit where you do all the stuff for Outlook. So whether you're adding extra padding or setting widths or all that stuff goes on those ghost tables. And then we only do that for Outlook. And then everything else is like in between. And then, like, as you said, for your buttons, you like wrap them in a table. And then you're about to go on to the columns and explain how the comments work on the columns, I think.
So, yeah, with this responsive code, again, Outlook doesn't support a lot of what modern clients do or web clients do. So we need to come up with solutions where it can still look nice and display properly on Outlook devices. Again, what I was just going to touch on is a different way of commenting out these tables. So in here, you can see we use true, and there is another one with false, but this true one, I believe this is from memory. So it's on Mark Robbins' good email code. This is where I got the code for the columns. The true statement applies to Outlook, but also tonline.de because it does like to render commented code. So what this is essentially doing is, again, placing this wrapper around these div tags to make it display properly, essentially. It doesn't have as much responsive code put into it because typically it will be just for the desktop versions of Outlook. Mobile applications do support quite a lot when it comes to div tags and responsive code. So that's the reason that they're here. So it limits the width to 100%. So it ensures that the individual columns don't randomly float off into other aspects of your email. It just keeps them uniform, and that's pretty much it. Is there anything else that you can think of, Jay?
No, so I was just going to say, so the main reason for the ghost tables was obviously to give that specific information to Outlook, but then also it was to pull that information away from our code. So whereas before, when we didn't have it as a ghost table and it was just for every email client, it meant that you were setting the width on desktop to that 600 pixels. And then on some email clients, they don't actually render the head of your email. So the biggest email client out there that doesn't do this is the Gmail app non-Gmail account. So say you had a Hotmail account and you opened it on your Gmail app on your phone, that actually renders differently to if you had a Gmail address that opened on your Gmail app on your phone. And because it doesn't respect the head of your email, the reset class that Stephen was talking about earlier wouldn't take effect. So then effectively your email would still be 600 pixels wide, but the Gmail app non-Gmail account would just resize it so it was smaller. So instead of the nice stacking of those columns, they would just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you couldn't really read what was going on, basically. So instead of doing this with the stacking, it would just bunch up and get really close together. So to battle that, we took away that element of fixed width and only did it for Outlook because Outlook was the one that needed tables, and shoved that in the ghost comment, or the ghost table, sorry, within those comments. And then everything else from, if you removed all of those ghost comment tables, then everything would be just automatically be responsive because you've got widths of max width on there, or 50% for columns and things like that. So then at least if someone opened your email on Gmail app, non-Gmail account, it would then be readable, but it might not be perfect. Like it would, some of the things might not be resized because the classes are not there, but at least things would stack, things would move, things would be responsive. So that was a really big reason for those ghost tables to like take that away. And then progressively enhancing that was when you added the classes. So the reset on there would do that for some of the images, etc., and things like that. So the whole idea with this ghost tables and code for everyone else was to try and make it flexible enough so that if the head didn't load, the email would still be responsive and work. So that's like another reason why people might go down this route of the ghost tables. Yeah. So the flip side of this is if you didn't use ghost tables and you just coded it with tables in there. And then the only way that that would work is if the classes were respected. So that means that on Gmail app, non-Gmail account, if you don't code with these in this way, then none of those classes are going to be listened to and your email will just be resized. Yeah, it all depends on who you're trying to support and things like that. One of the hardest parts with supporting that Gmail app, non-Gmail account is there's no way for us to categorically say that a percentage of our audience are on that account, because it will either come through as Gmail or it might come through as one of the other email clients, but it won't tell us that it's the Gmail app with a non-Gmail account. So no one would know how many people on your list happen to have that experience. So it's very hard to kind of determine how much work you should put into that experience. And then also another argument for not doing the ghost tables is just that if people have that email account, then all of their emails that are not coded with ghost tables look weird. So like if every email doesn't have ghost tables and it's just resized, if you're just used to that experience, then opening an email will always look like that to you. So then you don't think about it. So that's kind of another reason. And then the last reason that I can think for it is that there's just so much extra code with the ghost table way if you make sure that everything's covered. So if you're an organization that sends really long emails and you're always going to pack loads of content in there, then maybe you would think, actually, for everyone else's experience to be better and to hit that 100 kilobyte limit for Gmail, we're actually not going to choose to go the hybrid way, because what we want is more content in there rather than things cutting off just because there's a load of code that's commented, which is not even important for Gmail. So there's kind of arguments both ways, but yeah, and I think everyone would I think another thing about it as well, which a lot of people don't talk about, which I actually spoke about with Remy a lot, was you don't have to choose one or the other. So you can combine both in an email if you want to. So for example, in Stephen's email here, anything that's a single column, like the bit at the top with the image, the text, and the CTA, because that's a single column, maybe that doesn't need the ghost table bit. Maybe you could make it just, and you've got that wrapper that keeps it that size, so then you don't have to add any extra ghost stuff. And then maybe you only add it for multi-column things. And maybe
that's the reason I've done it that way.
Yeah, maybe you don't add it for every multi-column part as well. Like maybe if it's two images next to each other and they're just for display purposes, and it doesn't matter if they go really small, maybe you don't need to add all that extra code just to get them to stack. So there's definitely another, like, it always, whenever I've read articles, it always felt like you should code hybrid or you should code responsive or whatever it is. Whereas actually, often the best way is to combine those techniques and just think of the best user experience, I think.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. Best user experience, but also what I usually tell people is whatever you feel comfortable coding with. Obviously, just be conscious of that 102 kilobyte limit in Gmail. But if you're more comfortable coding in tables, then do it that way. There is no categorically right or wrong way of coding. If it works at the end of the day. As long as people can read the email, you get your point across and your links work, more importantly, to go through to your website, and whether it's selling products or you're trying to get subscribers to the YouTube channel or anything else like that. As long as the way you've done it is right for you, that's perfectly fine. One thing I was going to touch on was if you weren't going to use ghost tables and you were literally going to code in tables, you touched on it perfectly, Jay. It does add a lot of code bloat to your email because you have to define the table tag, the table row tag, and the table cell tag, and you do that multiple times. Whereas using div tags, it's just open div, close div, and then it's kind of done. Again, whichever way you are most comfortable with, use that way. Again, touched on it earlier, but the reason that I have the ghost table open and close at the top and bottom to keep that 600 width is so I'm not having to repeat it throughout the code itself. If you think of the email as a shoebox. So this ghost table is the shoebox, and then everything inside it is just where I'm placing it. And as long as it fits into that column, it's fine. That's how it should display on Outlook. I think that's hopefully an easy analogy to follow.
It made sense to me.
But yeah, that's all basically what a ghost table does. It just sets the width and tells it how to display it on Outlook specifically.
You know what? I was literally thinking. So while I was listening to you, you've made me go down a rabbit hole already. You said about having the width at 600, and then you were like, "Oh, but if you're doing fonts or things like that, you could use M's or Rems or things like that."
Yes.
And then we know that Outlook for Windows Desktop, which is the one that we keep talking about in those ghost comments, specifically it is Outlook for Windows Desktop.
Mm-hmm.
That actually uses points. So that's PT. So
yes.
Points for those. So inside the ghost tables, you could actually put the point value if you wanted to be like specific, because you are doing it with Outlook for Windows Desktop. That's the only one you could actually do points. And then also I was like, actually, there's lots of other CSS measurements, and I wonder how they all perform, because you can do inches,
VW as well.
viewport
width,
VH, viewport height. Yeah, there's quite a few out there. But yeah, I was wondering about, like, what if could you be millimeter specific? You can do or inch specific on Outlook. I wonder how well supported those kind of go through, and my font is actually 1.2 millimeters, or I don't know what yeah, like I want an inch. My headings are all going to be 1 inch tall or something like that. Like, I wonder if anyone's done that.
I'm sure there's some jokes to be had there as well. But
anyway,
when it comes to actual sizes, like inch, millimeters, like physical sizes, it just made me think, like, how many people actually print off an email? if you dictate, like, my heading is supposed to be I don't know, 20 millimeters tall.
I mean, on the lots of analytics code, so all the ones that you can get, like the pixel tracking code, like if you get one from, like, Parcel have one, Litmus have one, like they all have them. They all have the @media print media query, so that you can actually see, and that only fires if someone does actually print an email. So if you are interested in how many people do actually print your emails, you could do that. But I imagine that number is going to be very small, I would think. But that is, we did an email weekly once where we made it so that if you printed the email, you got something different. Because
I was going to say, you could add something, because it's a media query, you could add something hidden in your email. So when it prints, it just pops up like, "Stop printing emails." Or
exactly. Yeah.
Something like that.
You could figure it out, I'm sure.
Lots of fun to be had there, I think. The one that I wanted to do, which I might save for a different email. Do you remember? I'm not sure how much of a gamer you are, but the Konami code, the up, down, left, right, enter. There are loads of websites on the internet that you can put in that, and something will happen on the website. I was wondering if you could do something like that with email, but the only trouble is that did use JavaScript when I had a look at it on websites.
To register a key down or key up, you'd have to have like a click event on the JavaScript. So unfortunately, you couldn't do it directly in an email. However, that doesn't mean you can't do it, because what you do is you just add it for your view online only version. So and especially if you've got if you've got if you've got a ESP such as Salesforce, you can actually say context-wise for how the email renders as well. So you can use the context to be like, if you open it in an email client, if you open it as a preview, if you open it as a test, or if you open it as a view online, and then you can add
Okay.
specific code that works like that. So a few ESPs have got context as well. So yeah, you can, you could do something like that for like Salesforce or something like that, or if your view online was literally just a hosted version of your email. So because Email Weekly doesn't tend to have a lot of personalization,
Yeah.
we don't have to pull in lots of data. So we can often just create one web page, which is essentially another version of the email by itself. And because it's a web page and we're just sending a link, we don't have to put that in our ESP. So that web page can be literally anything. So we can add whatever code we like. So previously we did one where it had a game in your URL bar or in the tab at the top, because
Oh, that's pretty cool.
we could include the JavaScript to do that. So yeah, there's definitely, like, you could definitely do it in the view online version.
So what you're telling me is, like, going forward, I need to check Action Rocket's email for the Konami code going forward from today.
keep your eye. Yeah, probably not the one on Friday, but yeah, let's see if
I don't know. You're up for a challenge, aren't you, Jay? I reckon you could pull it off.
I mean, I could do it. Yeah. I just have to talk to the other members of the team and let them know that I'm actually doing it as well. But,
out of my way. I'm doing this. It's always
yeah. Good. I mean, like, yeah, I think one of the things that we've kind of touched on in the email design system is how we've got like, everyone has their own way of coding things. There's lots of reasons why you would code something a certain way. But then also, one of the things for email design systems that I think people need to remember is that a larger team than yourself might be using it. And also, in the future, you might not be the maintainer of it. So someone else might have to deal with it or change code or something. So if you keep the principles that we've already mentioned, where you kind of follow what other people do so that you're not breaking convention. So, you know, if you're doing a one-off email that is like an interactive thing and it's going to be used once and then never seen again, then you can code it however you like, because you're the only person who's going to see it. Once
go
it's
wild.
Yeah. Whereas an email design system hopefully will live for a couple of years, might pass through a few hands, will probably need email updates based on email clients, and you'll need to create new modules. So keeping it in a normal fashion of like resets, styles, mobile, coding all the modules in a certain way, keeping those styles in the order that you've kept them in, and all that kind of thing will pay dividends down the line by doing that. And if you can document it, then that is amazing. Yeah, we would never
from the start.
Yeah, start from the start. Yeah, we try never to do an email design system without any documentation, because even if you do a bit of document, like as an agency, we obviously hand over the design system. So quite often we want to give guidelines, but even if we were doing it for ourselves, we would still have some guidelines to be like, you know, images of this size, widths of this size, etc. So that at least if someone goes to pick it up in a few months or whatever, they have a little bit of information. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. And yet, as Stephen said, you are better off doing guidelines as you go, rather than the way that I do it, where I finish a project and then go, oh no, now I need to do a whole day of documentation on everything that I've forgotten that I've done.
I was going to say that's it. The issue with going back to it is, at the time the code makes sense, but if you go back to that code a month later, a couple of weeks later, what you knew at the time might not be fresh in your head, and it's just like, why did I do it that way? Why is that there?
Yeah, luckily my brain works like that, and I do remember. So I'm a lucky person in that way. But yeah, I would always recommend to do it as you go, though. Like you said, like, do a module, do the documentation. Why did I add this random piece of code? Comments were always a weird one. So
I do have comments in my code.
Yeah. So I find comments hard sometimes, from like, so sometimes when we hand over a design system to somebody else, we comment it because they've asked us to, and we add comments around, like, you know, around the heading, around the button, around it, so then they know exactly where in the code things are. Whereas if I was to give my code to Stephen and say, can you change the paragraph, I'm very confident that he would scroll through and find the paragraph element and then just change the text. Whereas so I don't necessarily need a comment that says this is the paragraph, because you would already find it. So yeah, and also comments do take up code weight. So if you are doing a really big email design system where you've got multiple elements in multiple modules, then if you comment a CTA in every module and you've got 50 modules, all of a sudden you've got 100 comments of CTA start, CTA ends, and all you've done is add that every single time. But
yeah, sorry, I just shared my screen again so I can show examples of the
with a CTA at the
common
beginning. Yeah. There's no like I said, like if you're like, because you're passing it on to people and people are maintaining it, so maybe it is important. Whereas if you're putting it into an ESP as a drag and drop editor and you're editing, you've created the code, and then everyone that uses it is going to use your visual editor, maybe those comments are not needed for that. So there's two ways you could do it. You could either include the comments and not worry about it, which is emails are not massive, so it's not going to cause a big issue, or have one set of code which has comments, and then before you do something with it, you can take out those comments. So you could use something like, there's a tool called Email Comb online, and that's really simple. You just paste it in, and it says remove HTML comments, and then it just removes all your HTML comments, and then you just paste it back into whatever editor you're using, etc. So then you can have your code with all your comments, then you can remove them all and then put them in your thing, or make it as part of your workflow when you're creating emails, like have the emails with all the comments, but then before you send it, one step is just remove all HTML comments.
Yeah.
And that the email comb is made to work with email code, so it won't remove all of your MSO comments. So they will stay, but the ones that just say like body title, paragraph, etc. Yeah. The only reason I would add a comment that stays would be if I was doing something, the whole mixed blend mode thing for the dark mode for Gmail.
Yeah,
if no one's ever seen that code before, or you've added a linear gradient or something like that, or in the CSS your faux absolute positioning code, like when you do it, it makes complete sense and you know exactly what's going on. But then, like you said, you come back to it in 3 months' time and you go, why the hell did I put Outlook image 100% here? Why is that there? Like, why have I done that? And then you're like, there's no way of knowing. And so if you're going to do weird stuff, then maybe you do add the comments in and keep them in for future developers. But just it's like everything, right? It depends. What's it going to be used for? Is it useful? That kind of thing.
I believe I've seen on, I don't know if it was Reddit or something, where it's a screenshot of code and it says basically add 1 to this number if you remove something and you've broken it.
Yeah. Have you tried to refactor this code? Yes, add a number, and yeah. It's a very common, Or I have comments in my code that for some tools that I've built that are not email that literally says, I don't know why this works, but if I change anything, it stops working. So just don't touch this bit. And then I've added like a to-do to go and look into it, but I never get around to it, and it works, so I'm not going to go back to it. So
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's reasons to add comments and reasons not. So think about it, and it just depends on where you're putting it, I guess.
Depends.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we've got everything now, Jay.
Oh, we could talk for hours on email design systems, but that is the basics, right? Yeah,
that
all
of the
parts that you need to get started. Yeah.
Again, I will add any information that we refer to in the video description. I think this one is best as a video.
And the only other thing I was going to say was Mark's, like you said, really good email, not really good email, that's not the right email, good email code, sorry, is
other good websites are available.
Yeah. The way that it's broken down is really clear for the specific use cases for that. So the template, the multi-column section, the buttons, etc., is really well broken down. But if you want to know more specifically just about MSO comments and why they work and how they work, then I've got an in-depth article on my lessons in email, which is MSO comments, and that has also the fix for that T-online bug for where it renders Outlook comments as well, as well as I popped it on how to target as well. But yeah, if you want to spend, I mean, it says it takes 6 minutes to read, but I imagine if you actually sat there and read it and played with the examples, it's probably like 10 minutes. But there's a lot more information about MSO comments and all of the different ones that you can see in the wild. So you've got true, false, VML, MSO, there's so many different things that could actually be included in a comment. So yeah, that's another good thing to document in your email design system as well. Like the comments that you saw within the code there, where it had like if MSO pipe and then IE, that was one specific way to write an MSO comment. So maybe there's a specific reason why you've chosen to do that comment rather than another one. So make sure you document it so that someone doesn't come through and go, oh, I can just change that to like if MSO or whatever, like if there's a specific reason why you've done something, comment those things, and in those guidelines, that's a good place to put that kind of information as well.
And copying it from a different email is not a valid reason.
Yeah. If you've got, yeah. I guess I mean that's a really easy way to figure out what someone's done, isn't it? When you've got a whole email and everything's the same, and then all of a sudden there's a piece of code that looks a bit odd, and you're like, why? Why is this odd? It's because it's just been copy and pasted, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's how we learn, though, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Inspecting other people's emails, and it's like, oh, I'll have that in mind. Understanding the fundamentals is always a good idea instead of just copy and pasting. That's my little disclaimer. Well, if it works, it works. If it gets a job done, that's all that matters. But yeah,
cool. Thank you very much, Stephen. That was thanks for putting that together as well. I know that even just putting together a brief example is always a lot of work, and whenever putting things together for talks or that are going to be out in public is always nerve-wracking. So thank you very much for sharing the code. And
thank you.
I always find when I share code, I find something that I've missed, but I don't say anything. So wait. Just everyone watch this video and just point out that thing that Stephen's missed, because he'll love that. Give him a bit of feedback in the comments. Yeah. Oh, by the way, you've done it. Yeah.
It's that anxiety again.
But you've got to get out there, and like the best way to do it is to just talk about it. Because also I've learned loads from people that have commented and said, "Oh, why have you done it that way?" And then I'm like, "Oh, why have I done it that way?" And then I often find that I've just done it that way because someone else told me to do it that way, and I just copied it. Or
again, it's just how you learn, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't. Yeah, a great job putting this together. And any comments that do come through will always just be a learning opportunity. Then no one's ever in the email community. No one's ever trying to be negative. So just remember that if there's ever any comments about your code, it's always feedback to help you improve.
Yeah, it's like when I did my litmus talk on the absolute positioning. I did get a few questions, and like some people were struggling getting things to work, so I had a look at their code, and I felt really bad because it was kind of like doing the talk was validation for me, like I know what I'm talking about, but then when people struggled getting it to work, and I just felt responsible for it, so it's just like, right, I need to go in and figure out why it's not working. So I always you feel responsible.
I always find teaching someone to code something will make you understand your code way more, and also it will point out all the things that you just didn't realize were a thing. So you would have tested it on all of your email clients, and you would have tested it within your template, but then someone has this one setting in their template, and that's completely throwing off the whole thing, but you would never have known that was a thing until someone does it. So it's definitely always worth doing it, because you're only going to get better by doing it.
There is one thing I've noticed on this email while talking about it. Now you mentioned that, but
keep it as an Easter egg and no one will know. Like it'll be like a super secret.
Well, I shall end the podcast there. Thank you for listening and watching, everybody. Yeah, leave us feedback, point out all my code mistakes. I will thank you for it personally, maybe. All right. Lovely to do a podcast with you, Jay.
See you soon. Bye.